All right, I am going to cover the 2024 GOP debate, and I wanted to wait a couple of days to get some of the post debate polling out before I did this so I could see if my predictions were actually correct. So, what the polling says here is that DeSantis won the debate. Thanks for stopping by, everybody, and I hope you have a great day. Leave a like and subscribe. So, anyone else that wants to just hear about this a little bit more, I'm going to cover what I think are actual winning conditions of the GOP debate. Who actually has a chance to take their message to the general, and the several different factions within the party, and who's kind of grasping to be the representative of those factions. So we have about 37% of the GOP, and they are the forever Trumpers. They love Trump. They're going to vote for him, rain, sleet, snow, or hail. And I feel like Vivek Ramaswamy was the only one playing to this specific crowd, and he did it well. 26% of people say he won the debate. If 37% are big Trump supporters, and let's say a lot of Trump supporters didn't watch the debate, he got some pretty good numbers. 26% is not too bad if you're pandering to a 37% of the party. The majority, 29%, say Ron DeSantis won. Ron DeSantis is doing a different message. He's trying to pull from all three pools. Now, 37% love Trump, 25% are never Trumpers. They will not vote for him under any circumstance. It doesn't mean they're going to vote Biden. It just doesn't necessarily mean they're going to vote Trump once the general comes around if he wins the primary. So that leaves about 38% more of the party that's kind of on the fence. They lean toward Trump, but they really just want to win the general election, and they would kind of support almost any candidate you put in front of them. They probably do have their preferences, and it looks like they're leaning toward either Trump or DeSantis. That being said, you look at polling from Iowa, you find that like 85% of Trump voters see DeSantis as a clear and viable second choice. So we see Ramaswamy pandering to that 37%. We see DeSantis trying to dip into all three pools. And when you do that, you can't go too strong onto either side. You can't pander too much to the never Trumpers. You can't pander too much to the forever Trumpers, because you turn off the other group when you start using particular talking points, or in Nikki Haley's case, flat out attacking Trump by name. You're going to lose that 37% no matter what. Now, there's about 38 people again sitting in the middle, and they could go anywhere, so they're still kind of up for grabs, but they're probably going to side with the person that has the best chance to win. So even if they like Doug Burgum, they're not going to really go with him. So I'm going to break these up into three different groups. First, we have group one, which is people that should probably just drop out at this point. They needed a stellar debate performance on something that turned their campaign around, and they did not get either of those two things. So we got Burgum, Hutchinson, and Scott. Now, I'm going to go over all of them, but post-debate, Burgum and Hutchinson went up to 35 and 45% disapproval in the party, respectively. As well, Scott didn't get that high disapproval rating. We'll see right. Scott's disapproval rating was only at 23% post the debate. People seem to like him. He just did such a piss poor job in the debate. I don't think we're going to really see him break out of the pack. So there are four people here trying to go for the never Trump vote. We got Asa Hutchinson, who nobody cares. We got Chris Christie, Mike Pence, and Nikki Haley. Now, going into this, Mike Pence is the clear choice for the never Trump vote. Him and Christie are both seasoned debaters. Nikki Haley actually in this debate held her own and showed some severe lady balls, and she treated the voters like adults, which was something I really respected from her. But at the end of the day, you got the guy that turned Trump down on January 6, 2020 by certifying the election in Mike Pence. So that's going to be the strongest message. We're going to have to see if Nikki Haley does enough to supplant him. And that's arguable, but we'll get to it. But this is group two I'm talking about now. Nikki Haley and Pence. These are people that probably don't have a big chance to win the primary overall, especially Pence and Christie. After the debate, Chris Christie's sitting at 60% disapproval. Pence is sitting at 54%. That's pretty high. If a majority of your party does not like you, chances of you winning the primary within your party are slim to none. But there are still some win conditions. So group three we're going to go into is going to be DeSantis, Trump, and Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, I'm not going to cover Trump's little interview with Tucker Carlson. It was beyond boring. I would have loved to see him on the debate stage instead, but he has so much to lose and so little to gain, it probably made sense for him not to get on the debate stage. DeSantis, being the second in that category, has so much to lose being in the front of the pack, but he's only up at like in the mid 20s in some polls, so he's in front of everybody on stage, but he's not even close to Trump. I think he's 40 points below Trump right now. So we're going to talk about all these guys. I'm going to talk about Vivek Ramaswamy. I got a whole page dedicated to him. I feel like somebody on his campaign team watched the 2016 debates way too many times and tried to craft a persona around 2016 Trump with some elements of 2016 Bernie thrown in there and some 2008 Obama thrown in there as well in order to manufacture this face that could be electable when in reality he just came off kind of like a prat and a know-it-all. I really didn't enjoy him. So, two winning conditions. First winning condition is, what are the primary voters going to vote for? Now, these issues sometimes line up with what the issues are in the general, and sometimes they don't. So I'm going to cover the big 6 issues that GOP voters are probably going to be voting on in this primary. And then each candidate also has individual battles that they're going through in their campaign. For example, Ron DeSantis has a great record. According to the GOP, people really like his record. He, Florida, the place that woke goes to die. He fired a couple prosecutors that weren't doing their jobs. He's been tough on things in schools that he considers indoctrination. He's been really tough on the border, crime and such. He's got a pretty solid record with most of the issues. So what DeSantis needed to prove wasn't that he has a good record. What he needed to prove is that he's a tough fighter, that he can stand up to people that are challenging him right in his face and show that he could be the cultural warrior that Trump is without all the Trump baggage. And it's not that high of a bar, but DeSantis's performance here hinges on less of the substance and more of the actual performance in the debate, the stage act, the drama class. So that's going to be, I'm going to go through each individual win condition and then see what I think they are anyways, and then see if the people clear the bar. So first, let's go through the issues. First is going to be inflation. So we can see here inflation is not only the biggest issue in the GOP primary, it is also the biggest issue in the nation, with the largest amount of people saying it's a very big problem. And if we look, the GOP is up by 12 points in conventional polling as the ones to settle this problem better. Now, that's just inflation. I've seen polls that have economic policy that put the GOP 22, 23 points over the Democrats in terms of their handling of the economy in whole. And if you look at the Trump presidency versus the Biden presidency, I think he's still at this point in his presidency is like 15 points ahead of Biden in his handling of the economy. So you can kind of see the GOP is the favorite party on the number one issue. The number 2 issue for the GOP here is going to be the federal budget. And we're going to hear it mentioned in this debate. It's not a huge deal in the general. It is still something that 56% of people say is a big problem. And the GOP is up a positive 8 on that as well. That being said, it's not a massive issue moving to the general. But we are going to hear about a bit tonight because it's a huge issue here. Now, following that same vibe, illegal immigration is number 3. Illegal immigration is number 3 for the GOP. It's very high up there, 70. But if you go and take a look at national polling, illegal immigration as a very big problem doesn't even break 50%. So it is going to be an issue that a lot of people vote on, and probably a lot of right-wing people, maybe some independents. But it is something you're going to hear about a lot more in the primary cycle, and something you'll probably see the GOP drop off a bit, not fully, but a bit, when they get to the general. And again, Republicans are about plus 10 in this particular issue. I lumped together 3 things when I put drugs and crime. I put drug addiction, gun violence, and violent crime all together. Now I know it's using with guns, that's kind of a bigger issue. So I kind of want to cover this really quickly. With drugs and crime, the Republicans are the favorite party to deal with this. Democrats, not all of them, but a good chunk of them were in favor and still are of defunding the police. And that meant a lot of things to different people. It meant a full defunding and abolition of police. To some, and others it meant cutting some funding and putting it into social services like we did in the 60s. It didn't work then. So if you look at violent crime here, You see that it's a big issue with the Republicans, so we're going to hear about a lot of violent crime tonight, probably. Drug addiction is also a big issue with Republicans. Gun violence, not so much. And the reason being is because gun violence sometimes is shoehorned in as more gun legislation. And to Republicans, their gun legislation is preserving the Second Amendment. So they are worried about gun violence in terms of the violent crime rate. They're not worried about gun violence in terms of adding more regulation. So it is kind of split. Next, going into another big issue, and this one kind of hit me out of left field, 63 and 62%. I didn't expect that both Republicans and Democrats were almost evenly split on this, want bipartisanship, want people working together. And if we look at policies here, it seems as though the ability of representatives to work together is it's the third biggest issue in the nation, according to these Pew polls. That's a pretty big one. I feel like both sides are actually even on that. There's going to be some other things we brought up here, but I want to just go through these 6 top issues really quickly. If you look at the 6 top issues, the GOP kind of has their finger to the pulse a little bit more of America with their big issues. Inflation, it kind of is the biggest issue for everybody, but the GOP cares a bit more. Now, affordability of health care, that's something that the Democrats kind of wall up the GOP on. That's kind of one of their signature issues. Biden just put some policy through to use Medicare to negotiate down prices this week. So you can see he's already making moves coming up for the next election as well. Bipartisanship, that one's split, but drugs and crime. And I would say gun violence is kind of a split issue again. In terms of legislation, the Democrats kind of take the cake on that. But other than legislation, the actual violence itself, the GOP is much more on pulse with these things, as well as moral values and federal budget. So almost all the issues where above 50% of the nation thinks it's a big problem. The GOP is either the better party or even with the Democrats. The only one really is affordability of health care. So now moving down to some other big issues that I'm going to bring up here. And since there's no polling, I can show you that. I'm going to kind of just give you the rundown on what you'll expect to see for good answers. So Ukraine is first. We're going to hear that brought up. So the Republican Party is somewhat split on Ukraine. Most of them are worried about the spending from the Biden administration, especially since we're in the middle of an inflationary cycle. But that being said, most of them don't like Putin. Most of them support the war. Most of them support Ukraine. They just don't want to be the number one financier for it. So I feel like the overall best message to appeal to most people, and this is kind of what DeSantis does, is I support Ukraine. Putin bad. Ukraine good. Zelensky good. But I don't like the fact that we're the number one financier, and we should probably stop giving them money until the neighboring nations that actually have a bigger stake in this fight put up equal amounts. Now, it is also brought up that GDP, if you factor in GDP to that, other nations have actually outspent the U.S. using their national GDP as a metric to judge from, but that's neither here nor there. So we're going to see some people take one side, absolutely. We're going to see some people take other side. One person in particular takes one other side, absolutely. And then you see the guy who's trying to bring the field together kind of tap dance around both sides. You got some good points, and I kind of am with them both. I'm not going to give a clear answer. Other issues, as I brought up already, the affordability of healthcare, huge issue, not even going to get touched in this debate. Finally, we are going to see abortion brought up. Now, again, abortion is not something you even see on this list. It's not something you see abortion policy here, 10 plus 12. What abortion is driving out Democrat voters. So since Roe v. Wade has been repealed, almost every effort to legislate abortion that's been left up to the people has failed. I think there was something in Kansas, Ohio, they were trying to get ahead of government referendums to amend the Constitution by making it you need 60 votes to pass a referendum, and they failed because the predicate to that was they knew something, a referendum for abortion was coming down the pipelines in November, and they were trying to get ahead of it, and they got exposed for that. So I'm going to take a look at all these candidates, and we're going to take a look at this interactive polling here. A lot of this is the post-debate polling that I wanted to pull out just to show you a few things. So now I'm going to cover the other win condition. We're going to go through each individual candidate and kind of what they had to do on an individual level to come out here as a victor. And in this, potentially all of them could be winners or all of them could be losers. So in terms of the first part, who covered the issues the best, I actually have to say Ada Hutchinson did a really good job with that. Nikki Haley did a solid job. Chris Christie hit on some good things. Mike Pence hit on some good things. But then we saw Chris Christie implode, and I think Mike Pence did an all-around solid job for himself. Ron DeSantis hit on several, but not all of these things. I'd say, if anything, Ada Hutchinson probably had the best record on all the major issues in terms of substance, but nobody cares about substance. Burgum, so let's jump into group one. Burgum probably answered the best questions, like question-wise. He stayed on the actual question. He answered with substance. He didn't generate headlines or clips. He doesn't translate well to a Twitter feed, is kind of my point here. He seems like a nice guy. He stuck to the key points. He actually talked about China. He was the only one when the China question came up that talked about China. The rest went back to immigration and fentanyl coming from China, and the southern border is the real problem with our foreign policy, even though it's domestic policy and blah, blah, blah. He also, and I think this was kind of to his detriment, was very big into a lot of old school GOP values that you probably, if you've been watching the GOP debates since before the Trump times, you'd see a lot of questions were solved by the 10th Amendment. So he wanted to go with a 10th Amendment solution to abortion, to schools, to gun policy. And it's just not going to fly in today's GOP. Today's GOP doesn't want to just sit on the sideline and let Democratic states trample people's rights in those states. They've taken the kind of the tact of what Democrats do to GOP states on abortion and other things. They try to push their views into those states. It's kind of the moment we're at in politics. I could go off on why, but that's not relevant to the video. So I just think he was just super out of place. He might have been a great 20 years ago, but just the way he was talking about hands off, big federal government, let the states do what they want, 50-state experiment. It just didn't fit. And same thing with Hutchinson, man. He was like a relic of another era. And Hutchinson is very anti-Trump. He's the only one on stage that calls himself a never Trumper. He was the only one that referred to January 6th as an insurrection on stage, things like that. He's very vehemently anti-Trump. But he's competing with Pence, Christie, and Haley to coalesce the 25% of people that are never Trumpers in the primary vote. And it's just like, why would you take the other choice when you have three younger, more well-known, better debaters that just, aren't some old kooky guy that turns off half the party? Or 47% of the party. So Hutchinson was pretty good on a few issues, especially budget. He was the one that got to go up on stage and brag about how his budget in his state was actually a surplus by the end of his time in office, whereas Christie, when he started talking about how good he was in the budget, the moderators busted his ass quite a bit. So, because he came in with a ton of debt, blamed it all on the Democrats, and left with a ton of debt and 8% approval rating today in New Jersey. Whereas Hutchinson is still very highly revered in his home state as well. I don't know. I just don't think he fit. I don't think he was kind of, again, a relic of a different era. He just didn't fit into the GOP today. I don't know. I just don't think he really has anywhere to go. Now, Scott, on the other hand, he could have kind of taken this home. He seems like a super nice guy. He seems not the type of nice guy you want to like hang out and have a beer with, but the type of nice guy you want as your neighbor, like somebody that watches your house when you go on vacation. He seemed like a really genuine dude. He was constantly against the bickering on stage, never got involved in it, like we saw with Nikki Haley. One moment she's saying women don't act like this, and then like 5 minutes later she's arguing as well. So like he actually stuck to his narrative of being a good guy and didn't just pay lip service to it. But at one point, he was talking about government spending, and they asked him about his record of voting for a bunch of big bills under Trump, 3 years in a row, trillion-dollar budgets. He voted for all of them, and then the fourth year, he voted for the massive COVID spending bill. And it's like, you helped Trump add $9 million in budget, and he just froze like a deer in the headlights, and he couldn't even address the first 3 years. He just said, well, COVID happened. So I feel like a lot of people in the GOP want somebody that's not an old white man to be the head of the party, so they can kind of get rid of the brand of anti-woman, racist. Those things won't work. They can maybe siphon some of the women in black vote or women in minority vote from the Democrats, and they're really trying to push somebody up, and Scott just was the best person that they had at the moment. I think he was elevated past his abilities to be put on this stage. He kept going back to his campaign speech over and over and over, and it just didn't work. It didn't work at all. I just didn't like him on stage. He didn't do a good job. So that's those three. As you can see here, of the three that I discussed, Scott's the only one with an approval rating in the 20s, a disapproval rating in the 20s, and an approval rating over 50. Hutchinson and Burgum, no chance. Scott probably had a chance, but he did such a piss poor job in the debate. I think it might hurt his career in the long run, to be honest. So moving into Group 2. Group 2, we have all the people that are trying to fight for the Never Trump, trying to consolidate the Never Trump 25% vote. So we got Chris Christie, we got Mike Pence, and we got Nikki Haley. So I'm going to go into Chris Christie first. And again, he started out strong. He really started out talking about a lot of things that the Republican voters actually care about. That being said, he finished, I want to say the highest. Yeah, he had the highest unfavorable rating post-debate polling. So when you got 60% of the party saying that you're unfavorable as their candidate, it's going to be really tough for you to get votes in a primary. Unless you have some special thing like Mike Pence, where he was the guy that actually turned Trump down in January 6th for certifying the election. So it's going to be tough for Christie to make the argument that he's the best Never Trump person to take that mantle. And I don't know. So let's go into his win condition. They're slim, unlike Christie, and it's hard for me to say that without some sort of act of God happening to both Mike Pence and Nikki Haley, that there is a win condition for Chris Christie. I don't think personally he can come out there. And I think really he's just going to have to fall on the sword and be the guy that goes down. Because, all right, so Vivek and him started getting back and forth bickering going on. I think it was question 2, the climate change question, where Vivek just flat out insults everybody on the stage for the second time in a row on the second question of the night. And Chris Christie's like, you know what, I've had enough. And he goes off into him. And he loses his temper. I think he calls him out for his book then. He calls him out for being, for stealing Obama's, stealing a couple lines from Obama about being the tall, skinny guy with a weird last name on stage. And he said, the last time we had that, we got Obama, and you're bringing that same energy to the stage. And it was okay for a dunk. It was all right. But, Chris Christie doesn't want to do that. And the reason is because Chris Christie's got a long history of losing his temper and doing things politically that are not good for the nation, like blocking a bridge because somebody under him didn't do what he wanted in the state of New Jersey. So that's kind of what it reminded me of. It reminded me of the guy that'll shut down a bridge to spite you. Again, when he started coming into this, he was doing good. He was arguing a little bit back and forth with DeSantis about how DeSantis was pandering too much to the primary voter, and he wanted to focus more on the general election. He's the only one that can win against a blue incumbent because he's the only one that has. In New Jersey, he was in a deeply bipartisan district, which is bipartisanship, number 4 issue for the GOP, number 3 for the Democrats. But when he does clear that bar, so I will give him that. When he was on message, he was doing good. He was hitting a lot of the key points that he needed to. And he had another good moment when the Pence question, did Pence do the right thing on January 6th to certify the election? He was very vocally siding with Pence, and it made him look like a stand-up guy. And kind of calling out people on stage like Ron DeSantis, who was being rather mealy-mouthed about it. He was kind of burying his answer a little bit when he could have led with it and then said the exact same point and would have come off a little stronger. So he did all right, but then again, he squabbled with Vivek several times, and it reminds you of that Jersey guy thing that, again, will shut down a bridge if you don't do what he says. And he kind of, with one of his policy prescriptions for crime, when they're talking about crime, he starts talking about how he would undermine the will of the voters in each state and use the federal government to assign U.S. attorneys to prosecute crime in areas where DAs aren't living up to the standard he wants. So he's basically saying, I'm going to empower the federal government to overrule the voters' choice and the person that they selected to be in office, and use my power as the president to shove federal prosecutors in where they kind of don't belong, and again, overrule the process. So it reminds you of that you didn't do what I want, well, I'm going to use my powers to overrule you. And it comes off as like the tough guy thing. That's when he started to get all huff and puffy. That's what he reminded me of, a Jersey tough guy. So he did have the biggest dunk of the night. Talking about law and order and the Constitution, Vivek was saying how he has a great respect for the Constitution and he's pro law and order. And Christie chimes in and basically says, like, you can say that, but in your book, in your book, you trash Trump as doing the wrong thing on January 6th, and now here you stand right behind him, backing him up, saying he's the best president ever. You say you're for law and order, but you're siding with Trump, who wanted to suspend the Constitution and who you want to be pardoned and forgiven for his crimes before he even goes to trial. Which at one point they did call for in this, and Pence kind of called them out. You have to have a conviction before you can do a pardon. So, all in all, I think Christie doesn't really have much of a win condition, but when he was calm and tame, he was sounding pretty good, and then he snapped and reminded you exactly of why he has the high approval rating he does, or disapproval rating he does. So let's move on to Pence. And 54% disapproval rating in the party is tough to win, which is why I could reasonably see Nikki Haley overtaking Pence. Even though Pence is the guy that said no to Trump on January 6th, Nikki Haley, in comparison with the favorability and unfavorability numbers, is doing just way better than Pence. Plus her performance in this debate, she was the one with the biggest balls. So it's going to be tough for Pence to justify Pence being the representative of that 25% of never Trumpers. But they like him because he's there on principle. Even if he has no chance to win, he's running on principle. That being said, he was very poised. I'll give him that. He had a Bible moment that came off as a little too pandery to the evangelical voters in Iowa and whatnot. He had a couple smackdowns on Vivek that didn't have his temper flare up in the same way Chris Christie's did. He did a lot of things good. It was a solid job by Pence on the things he did good. The thing is, every time he started talking about his accomplishments, he had to talk about his, except for a couple that he mentioned when he was like, before he was the vice president, almost every accomplishment he brought up was when he was Trump's vice president. He's taking credit for these things while simultaneously damning Trump as somebody you shouldn't elect again. It's like you're running on Trump's record, but then assaulting Trump's record where it's convenient for you. So it's really hard to justify, like, he's kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth here. Like immigration, crime, and economy. He's citing all things that Trump's taking credit for as well. So if you're going to sit there and run holding Trump's record in your hand and then turning around and also running on the principle that, you're running against Trump for doing what he did on January 6th and after, it just doesn't, it looks like you want to have your cake and eat it too. So again, Nikki Haley could come up from behind and take him out in this position because of A, how unelectable he is, and B, how most of his good points in terms of his ability and success kind of piggyback off of Trump's ability and success. So he also had a moment. Oh, okay, yeah. So he had a couple deer in the headlight moments that he didn't answer well. So on the first question, when Nikki Haley just flat out attacked Trump on his spending, when they were talking about inflation and the economy, she said Biden's bad, yes, but Trump's bad too. And a lot of people on this stage approved a lot of his bills that saw him spending trillions of dollars every year, even before COVID. And she blamed him in part for abortion. So when it got to Pence on that question, he was asked a follow-up about, is Nikki Haley right? Are your policies from the Trump administration to blame on abortion? And he just he dodged the question. He gave some whatever answer and said, we stand by the record of the administration, but doesn't actually tell you. Yeah, so that being said, he was the subject of a question. Did Mike Pence do the right thing? So it's hard for him to come out looking fully bad in this debate, even if he was a deer in the headlights a bit and kind of got off the substance a bit and did a lot of pandering and a little bit of bickering. He was the highlight of a question that everyone on the stage except for Ramaswamy was patting him on the back for. If every other candidate pats you on the back for, not letting Trump take the January 6th the way he wanted to, then you're going to come out looking good, even if your performance wasn't amazing. I don't know. Overall, he did what he needed to do. I'm not hating too much on Pence. He was okay. He was pretty good. But I don't know. I could see Nikki Haley overtaking him. This is my third time recording this video. The first time I recorded it, I said I couldn't see a world where Nikki Haley could overtake him. The second time, I saw it as a viable option, but still not likely. And now, as I rewrite my script and go over this over and over, I'm at the point where I could easily see Nikki Haley supplanting Pence for the Never Trump vote. So let's go to Nikki Haley. She came into this the very underdog, and she needed to get her name recognition up there. She was Trump's UN ambassador, but, who the hell watches the UN ambassador talk? Almost nobody. So people knew who she was, but nobody really knew who she was. So she got her name recognition out there, but she had to do a lot more than that. She kind of was running a Never Trump campaign, but I don't know, I just haven't seen her in the fire. I didn't have a reason going into this debate to say that she should be even higher than Christie, let alone Pence, in terms of being that Never Trump vote coalescer. Coalescee. The person that they vote for. That being said, she went hard, question one into Trump, and I was kind of shocked about that because I expected it to be Christie. She was probably the toughest on Trump. The follow-up from her had Pence stuttering, and I think he kind of got a little angry about that. In a way, he was sort of defending Trump because defending Trump is also defending his own record. They get it. Her and Pence got into it like 3 times. Once on the inflation a bit. The next one was on abortion. Now, Nikki Haley probably had the best stance on abortion. Abortion drives out Democratic voters. It really doesn't mean much to the GOP. They got the big win when they repealed Roe v. Wade. So it's not going to drive out voters, but it will drive out the opposition vote. So her stance on stage was like, look, I'm pro-life, but only 50% of the Senate is, and we got to be tactful on how we actually pass policy. We got to look at what the actual voters want. We got to have an adult conversation about this, and I think we should coalesce around 15 weeks or so. And Mike Pence kind of publicly disagreed with her and said she's naive, while also agreeing that we need to coalesce around a 15% federal stance on abortion. Burgum on this question deferred, the states should be able to do whatever they want like it is right now, and it just, again, seemed out of touch. So Pence tried to beef with her a little bit, but really, ultimately, he was kind of saying the same thing. So, I think she did. I think she had the best answer because she treated people like adults with her answer. Like, look, I'm strongly opposed to abortion, and I know a lot of people are, but we're not the majority. We don't control 60% of the Senate. We don't control 2/3 of the House. We don't control 2/3 of the states. We're not going to be able to pass the level of policy we want. So let's be adults about it. She brought up the word women a lot, and when it comes to the moral values argument, she was talking about trans women in women's bathrooms, and how this is the women's sports, and how this is the women's issue of our time, and blah, blah, blah. So she would disarm a lot of the suburban women that didn't vote for Trump, that came out for Trump, I think, in 2016 and didn't come out for him again in 2020, the ones he turned off. The soccer moms and whatever the polling says about his presidency. So I do see a viable world because of her stellar debate performance, because she was so vehemently anti-Trump, because she's not tethered to Trump's record for her record of success, and because of, again, her approval and disapproval here. I think she's probably the best person to have aggregating the Never Trump vote, and she could peel some people out of that 38%, the big group that's not really decided yet. They did put her at 3rd place in the debate, and I think from where she came in to where she ended, she had the biggest gap. If you had to just pick a winner for all around, encompassing the stage art, encompassing the substance, encompassing doing what she particularly needed to do to make her campaign shine, which are my 3 factors of winning, I'd say that she probably performed the best out of everyone on stage. Flat out, if I had to pick a winner, I would say it was Nikki Haley. That being said, with the criteria I broke down for winning, you could have multiple winners in this debate. I'd say DeSantis probably comes away with the biggest W because he had so much to lose, and he actually gained from this. So Nikki Haley, I will say at one point, she's coming out saying if you want to get something said, you tell a man. If you want to get something done, you tell a woman. And, basically kind of making fun of the guys for bickering and then did that same bickering with Vivek Ramaswamy on foreign policy a little later in the debate. So, you know, like, Now we're going to move to group three, and this is the biggest group that I have the most written for each candidate. So I'm going to go right into Vivek. And Vivek is kind of the proto-Trump. Again, I think somebody from his campaign that was helping him decide his strategy for running in this election watched the 2016 debates 1,000 times on repeat with a notepad trying to pick out things that people liked about Trump and said, Vivek, you need to do X, Y, and Z when you're on stage. And it just came off as forced, unnatural, and it bit him in the ass because he started too early, right out the gates, insulting everyone around him, and they just went hard on him. The dunks back to him were substantially better than the dunks that he had on others. So, let's take a look at his ratings real quick. So, Vivek Ramaswamy had a 29-point drop in name recognition. Now, only 8% of people, no opinion, never heard of him. So his name recognition went way up. Most of that went to the disapproval. So people that weren't already Ramaswamy fans, he did get about a third of the people that learned his name. About 2/3 of the people decided they did not like the cut of his jib. So I feel like there's no reason, if these are the primary voters in the GOP, there's no reason to suggest that even a higher percentage of independents and Democrats that could potentially vote for the GOP this cycle, they'd probably dislike him even more. I think it's pretty clear that, there's a good chance 80% of independents, if 66%, 65% of Republicans that just learned who he is dislike him, I think it's reasonable to assume 80% of independents that learn who he is are probably going to dislike him too. I think if you're already a fan of this guy and you like him as the Trump proxy, it's not much is going to change your mind. If you still like Trump at this point as your number one, not much is going to change your mind. A lot of the qualities, though, that he embodied about Trump are ones that people dislike. Some of them are him talking out of both sides of his mouth. Chris Christie called him out on stage about his book where he fully backs Mike Pence's actions and damns Donald Trump on January 6, 2020, and then how he's on stage saying the opposite. Or Nikki Haley called him out on Israel. He said he wanted to cut Israel's funding. But then on stage, he's like, oh, that's not true. I'm going to clear this up right now. And then he never clears it up. When I play my biggest moments from the debate here, you're going to see that exchange between them. So yeah, right out the gates, he was making the case he was the only one on stage that isn't bought and paid for, isn't a puppet. He's the only one that can get the job done, and all these people have been entrenched in the swamp too long. He basically called them all swamp creatures from the first moment he spoke, and continued that until at the end of the second question, Chris Christie was the first one to really tell him to F off. So I see Vivek as the exact opposite of Burgum, where Burgum was all substance and no flair. Vivek was all flair and no substance. Most of his answers sucked. He just called climate change a flat-out hoax. So yeah, what's his win condition? Well, it's basically just name recognition. Since he is running for the heir apparent to Trump, let's say Trump gets knocked out of the race, he wants that 37% of forever Trumpers to go to him. And I think he secured that spot, for sure, with a lot of the 38%, the biggest group of the party that hasn't really made up their mind but lean toward Trump. I think a lot of those people liked him as well. You can see that it's not a great spot to be because Trump isn't going to win number one, and he's not going to pick somebody so close to him to be his vice president. That'd be odd, to say the least. It would be politically disadvantageous for him to do that. But I think he did a great job as making himself the heir apparent to Trump, and that's all he really needed to do. Come out and show that he's basically a mini Trump in a lot of ways, especially the populist ways. And in some ways, he's even more Trump than Trump. Especially on Ukraine. Trump gives more of a line in line with the neocon answer for Ukraine, and Vivek gives the netcon answer to the T. That being said, he dodges a lot. When he's asked about the economy, he gives a couple quick little lines to it, and then he switches to talking about himself. Or when he's asked about the Maui fire, he says climate change is a hoax. When he's asked about homelessness and the crime wave, he starts talking about mental institutions. And there's just all kinds of things where he doesn't really directly answer the questions at all. He says a bunch of vague things on foreign policy about how we can't protect our southern border and aid Ukraine at the same time. And this is kind of where Nikki Haley lost it with him. And Yeah, we'll see that exchange a little bit. Vivek actually got booed on one of his exchanges with Mike Pence, and it was, I want to say it was about Israel. But there was also, when he was going to clarify about Israel, instead of saying anything about the money or the funding he was saying he was going to cut off, instead he's talked about how he liked their border policies and crime policies. Never once talked about the issue that was brought up. So, I don't know. I just feel like he had no substance, but he was fun. He was fun to watch. So people that go into this looking for that popularity contest, yeah. So now we're going to talk about DeSantis, the Trump alternative, the one that people think is the most serious candidate to unite the three major camps in the GOP. DeSantis probably had the most to lose of the people on stage for this debate because he was already at the top of the pack in polling under Trump. He already had a 67% approval rating with the party going into this and only a 26% disapproval rating. So as you can see, he did gain 5 points and lose 1 point off his unfavorability rating. Got a little bit more name recognition out there, but what he needed to do was the stage art. As I said in the beginning of this, he already has the record that the GOP is looking for today. Florida is the place where woke goes to die, but he also does things the NatCons like, and a lot of people like him. He's, in ways, he's Trump without the baggage, but in other ways, he's a responsible legislator that's actually good at his job. So, like, you know, the exact opposite of Trump. But yeah, so he needed to show some strength first and foremost. He needed to show that he could be that cultural warrior that Trump is, that he wasn't just going to keel. So, second question, climate change. The moderators asked people to raise their hands, and he just steps right in and says, you know what, I'm not going to raise my hand. That's not smart. I'm going to just step up and answer the question. And he does, and it looks really good. And even though his answer has no substance, and all he does is talk about Biden saying no comment to the Maui fire stuff, which isn't good, but no substance to actual the climate change question. And the Maui question, he still looked strong for that. But again, he should have stuck with that, not raising a hand for anything the whole debate, because later on the night, he needs to look like a leader. He needs to look like he's somebody that can lead the pack. Later on the night, they ask if Trump is convicted of a crime and whatnot, or would you still support him and vote for him as president in the general election? And he looks around to see if everyone else is putting their hands up. And when he notices they are, he like timidly puts his up as well. It looked super weak, super like following the pack, and I saw some people memeing on him. If you're dunking on DeSantis for that, you gotta. That's probably one of his weakest moments of the night. So DeSantis' win condition were kind of to maintain the status quo of what he had, but also show some personality things, like with Ukraine. He answered that question about as perfectly as you could in this circumstance. I'm pro-Ukraine. I'm anti-Russia. I'm worried about money. And until we get some more people spending money, I think we should cut off U.S. funding. It's their problem in Europe, and they should be spending more than us. Not equal, not less, but more. So he did have a couple He wasn't great. He was moderate. He did have a couple weak moments. I talked to you about one of the big weak ones, but with the Pence was correct question. Everyone was flat out asked, did Pence do the right thing on January 6th? And Ron DeSantis' answer, though it was good and correct, and part of his message of staying focused on the mission and moving forward, which he said like 10 times over the course of the night, the fact that he had to be asked like 3 times to answer the question before he said, yes, I have no beef with Pence, I think he did the right thing. His answer, like, that should have been the lead of his answer, not the butt end. Yeah, I think Pence did the right thing, but we really need to stop focusing on January 6th and move forward. We lost that election. Trying to relitigate it is going to lose us this election. And that's a good, solid point. He really needed to stick to that a little bit harder. I just think he should have been honest with his answer to the question up front. But again, most people aren't watching this for substance. I am. Some people are. He really was pandering to the GOP base here. He did talk about bipartisanship a little bit, but what he really talked about was the border. He was gleeful to announce that he would approve lethal force at the border, and it was like his big strong man policy. I'm a tough guy, and even on the questions to China, he went back to the border, and so his disapproval rating, it actually went down 1 point as a result of this debate. His approval rating within the party went up 5 points, and I only want to show this for DeSantis because I don't think it matters that much for the rest. but his considering is now went up higher than Trump, whereas Trump's went down for not showing up for the debate. Only a couple of points. It looks like only like, I don't know, 4 or 5 points, but it went down for him not showing up. I don't think I hurt him in the long run. He's still 40 points ahead. That being said, I think I covered everything for DeSantis. I also think, again, he's doing a solid job talking to the only Trumpers and talking to the never Trumpers in a way that will siphon voters out of those camps without pissing off too many people in those camps. I think he is running a great campaign, and I see a lot of the hate from the campaign trail. I think a lot of it's unwarranted. So now I'm going to briefly cover Trump because he wasn't there. I tried 3 times to watch that Tucker Carlson interview. It was a snooze fest. It was boring. As somebody that's watched probably 20, 30 Trump rallies, maybe 50, 60 Trump speeches, most of the speeches he gave while he was in office, I watched. Same thing with Biden, same thing with Obama. I'm a political junkie. I really like politics. So I watched a lot of Trump. This was not a great viewing of Trump. It was boring. Yeah, I think his lack of presence only hurt him in the debate a little bit, so he probably was better off skipping it. I think he made the right choice to skip it because he has a lot more to lose than to gain, especially with all those indictments against him. If Chris Christie got the chance to nail him on some of those indictments, man, could have hurt him bad. And yeah, again, Nikki Haley too, she was also going at him a bit. Yeah, I see. I don't know. The numbers are virtually unmoved right now in terms of the actual like RCP polling for the primary, but DeSantis is showing some good inner party numbers. It looks like he's the party's favorite generally, but again, it's different factions, and Trump's still leading the vote polls, so we'll see what happens. We're still pretty early in the debate. We could see like Iowa and New Hampshire go to DeSantis, and maybe some of Trump's indictments move to the next level. I know he's going to trial the day before Super Tuesday for the Florida indictment, or the Georgia indictment, I'm sorry. No, I'm not sure. He's going to trial for one of those indictments. I have to look. It just came out. I just heard it yesterday. So, moving in forward, we could see some things hurt Trump's poll numbers, and that would only help DeSantis. So I also want to go on one more tangent real quick before we wrap up here, and it's about Fox News hosting this debate. The pre-debate stuff was fine, I guess. It was okay. A lot of it felt like a sporting event. It felt like they got Fox Sports to set this up, and that they were kind of allowing some of the chaos during the debate because it generates clips and generates headlines and highlights, and that's why you didn't see Doug Burgum in any of it, because that guy is like highlight poison. Every answer he gives is just, here's your answer to the question in the most boring voice I got. And that's it. Like, he was great in terms of substance, but you're not going to see any clips of it. So, I feel like the woman that sang the national anthem went way over the top. I was listening only. I thought it was a black chick. I come in and look at some, like, country white woman. I was just shocked by the way she was using her voice. And I mean, she was great. Don't get me wrong. She was really good singing. She was just hamming it up. And it was a little over the top. I really didn't like that they used the song Richmond, North of Richmond for their economy question when they could have skipped that part and asked a really substantive question and saved a minute. They're talking about how much they needed to crunch time in this debate. Then don't show me crappy music. I don't want to see a minute of that song. You could have let somebody talk for a minute. It just seemed to pander to like a younger crowd. I did not like it. I didn't like anything about it. So, but yeah, Fox News also lost control of the debate a couple of times, and they had to keep going over the rule. They went over the rules, I think, 2 or 3 times about the bell and about how people need to stop talking over each other, and it just kept happening. Nikki Haley and Vivek were yelling at each other. I had to rewatch it 3 times to hear what both of them were saying, and that's how I know Nikki Haley kind of won the exchange and made him look like a fool, because, crowd was cheering and booing the whole time. They had no control over the crowd. They had no control over the candidates. It lacked in and needed some major professionalism. Kind of seemed like a little bit of a clown show. That being said, my ultimate summary here is I feel like the big winners of the night were, again, the 3 different factions. You got your Ron DeSantis, who I guess Ron, Doug Burgum, and Tim Scott, you could all put them in the same group of people that are trying to like be the party uniters and not attack one side too much. Easily Ron DeSantis took the win there. You got Vivek and Trump. Trump didn't show up, so Vivek took the win for that coalition. And Nikki Haley, I would say, took the win for the Never Trump coalition. Will Hurd and Francis something, probably not going to see or hear from them again. I would guess these two guys are probably, these three guys here with these two are all going to be out of the race pretty soon. And then I feel like one of these three will stay in while the other two would drop out. My guess right now is it'll be Nikki Haley. I think we'll see these four candidates right here with the highest favorability rating, besides Tim Scott. I think we'll see them kind of in it for a little bit longer of a haul. I could see Pence making it all the way to Super Tuesday, though, you know. We'll see what happens. But I would say, yeah. So again, if we're looking at winners, DeSantis, Haley, Vivek, out of all those, I would say Haley was the winner because she advanced herself the most, but DeSantis was the overall winner because he enhanced his chances of being the party's representative down the line. So that's my call, and it lines up with the polling. So if you don't like it, you could take your wrong opinion and put it in the comments, and I'll laugh at you for being wrong and stupid. Like, subscribe. Thanks for watching all this way, and have a good one.